Please leave. Please leave. I am not okay with this. Please leave my job. I have to go.
Don't touch me. Hey. Don't touch me, little man. Move, get back.
Come on now.
Get back. Move, bro. Move, get back. Get back. No, I'm not. Get back. Please move from my car, bro. Move, little man. Please move.
Oh, you on that?
Move, little man. Move. Get my door, please.
That is a mother standing near her own job, phone up, filming the man she was terrified of and begging him to walk away. She had already gone to the police, and she had the video to prove everything. Days later, she was gone. Keep watching, because that plea is only the first warning ignored in this story. Over the next few minutes, we are going to walk through 3 different cases, and I am going to show you the receipts as we go. The court records, the police accounts, the videos these people left behind. We start in Belle Glade, Florida, with a mother of 4 named Shantae Butts, because her case shows you the whole machine failing in slow motion, one ignored warning at a time. Shantae Letitia Butts was born on February 5, 1993, in West Palm Beach, Florida, and she grew up in the Belle Glade area with deep roots in the Glades community. She graduated from Glade Central Community High School with the class of 2011, and after that she kept building, earning a certification in early childhood education from Palm Beach State College. By the time of her death, she had her Class G security license and was working for a security company. A 32-year-old mother of 4, raising a son named Kamar and 3 daughters. Some early news reports listed her age as 34 or even 42, but her obituary and her family confirm she was 32. People who knew her called her Shay Shay, and they remembered a woman who loved hard and showed up for her people. She left behind her parents, a long line of brothers and sisters, and a community that turned out for her, with a viewing at the Butts Memorial Chapel and a funeral at First Baptist Church, Belle Glade, before she was laid to rest. A coworker described her simply as a very nice person to work with. That is the woman we are talking about here, a mother building a steady life, not a headline, and it is important to keep her in your mind as we get into what was done to her. The man who took all of that away was her ex and the father of her children. Little Mac Williams was in his mid-40s and had a documented history of domestic violence going back more than a decade, involving Shantae and at least 2 other women. Officials would later describe him in the coldest possible term for a man like this, a frequent flyer, someone the system kept seeing and kept releasing. To understand how bad it got at the end, you have to understand how long the warnings had been piling up and how little was ever done about them. The first time the public record shows him hurting Shantae was in July of 2024. Williams forced his way into her home, put her in a chokehold that left her struggling to breathe and near passing out, kicked her several times, and took her phone so she could not call for help before he ran off when her daughter saw him. Read that slowly, because the charge on paper was domestic battery by strangulation, which is a fancy way of saying he choked the mother of his children until she almost went unconscious. He pleaded guilty to that and to felony battery, and the punishment tells you everything about why she ended up dead. Listen to how one station laid out just how little this man ever actually served.
Despite being found guilty of choking Shantae Butts in July of last year, court records show the most jail time Little Mac Williams served was 157 days, with each case after that carrying less time in jail.
157 days was the most he ever got, and it only went down from there. A no-contact order came with that first case, an order that was supposed to keep him away from her. It did nothing. In October of 2024, he was arrested for violating that order because he would not stop calling her from private numbers, and a witness saw him banging on her door, and he served 48 days. Then, in November, he broke into her home again, stole her phone, fought her for it, and pushed her around, and that felony charge got knocked down to a misdemeanor, so he served 66 days. You're watching a pattern where the crimes get more serious and the sentences get shorter, and Shantae is documenting all of it. She was not passive. She used her doorbell camera to record him. She filed report after report, and she even left home for safety, staying in a hotel and heading out to Clewiston to get away from him. Even so, officials noted the no-contact order was ignored for nearly a year, and she kept reporting harassment, threats, and damage to her property the whole time. His record stretched far beyond her, too, and it went back decades. Back in 2014, a different ex-girlfriend told police he broke into her place, choked her while telling her she belonged to him, raped her, and beat her again when she said she would call the police, and he pled down to felony battery and served only 36 days. In 2018, another ex accused him of stalking and trespassing, including tampering with her cameras, and he served 59 days. And in 2023, he struck yet another woman in the head and walked away with a 2-day jail sentence. By the time he got to Shantae, he was a convicted felon who wasn't even allowed to touch a gun, which becomes important very soon. The people whose job it is to prosecute cases like this have a name for men who keep cycling through the system, and they'll tell you straight that these cases are hard to win when the punishment never sticks. Listen to a prosecutor explain the exact problem that let a man like this stay free.
There are frequent flyers when it comes to domestic violence, like in any other area of criminal law. The focus of the state attorney's office is to go after violent offenders and habitual offenders. And in domestic violence, that's no different.
That phrase, frequent flyer, is exactly how officials came to describe Williams, and it's a quiet admission that the system saw this man over and over and never once held him long enough to matter. Shantae was not fighting a stranger who came out of nowhere. She was fighting a man the courts already knew by name, and she was doing it mostly alone, with a doorbell camera and a stack of police reports as her only shield. Last week of Shantae's life was a countdown, and the whole thing was caught on camera and written into police reports. The gun matters here because in the days before her death, her firearm had been stolen out of her vehicle, and Williams was later hit with an active warrant for burglary and theft tied to that gun. On July 2nd, he showed up banging on her bedroom window and taunting her, asking if she was missing her firearm, a direct reference to the very gun that had just been taken from her car. And CBS 12 reported he also broke in and stole a bottle of soda that day. On July 4th, he came back and was banging on her doors, so she and her son fled to Clewiston to get away from him. And then came July 5th, the worst day of all, the day that finally pushed deputies to act, at least on paper. July 5th was the day the stalking became impossible to ignore, and it's worth walking through hour by hour because it shows you a woman doing everything right while the walls closed in anyway. Her doorbell camera pinged her while she was still out of town to tell her Williams had gone inside her home, a home he didn't live in. So she called law enforcement again and spent the night in a Clewiston hotel out of fear. When she got to work that night, she was told he was standing by the front gates looking in, and then a private number kept calling her and threatening to do something to her company at her home. It kept going. She got more camera alerts showing him at her front door messing with the camera. When she went back to grab something before heading to work, he ran at her yelling. So she jumped into the passenger side of her car, locked everything, climbed into the driver's seat, and when he stood in front of the car, she reversed and sped off, nearly hitting him before driving to her job and calling 911 with a tear running down her face. That night, deputies found probable cause and issued a warrant for aggravated stalking. Here's the part that turns this from a scary story into a tragedy, because that warrant sat there and he was never picked up. Watch how the timeline of that failure was reported.
On July 5th, deputies issued a warrant for stalking, but he wasn't arrested. 6 days later, she was dead.
On the night of July 11th, 2025, it all came to an end inside her home on State Road 715 in Belle Glade. Around 11:47 at night, Shantae's young son called 911 and told the dispatcher that his stepfather had broken in through a window wearing a black hooded sweatshirt and was confronting his mother. While the boy was still on the line, the dispatcher heard a man's voice demanding to know where his mother was, and then gunshots. All 4 of her children were in that house, along with her current boyfriend. The details that came out afterward are hard to sit with, and they came from her own children. The son who called 911 told investigators he had gathered his younger siblings, who were huddled together in shock, and moved them to his room before he made that call. One kid trying to protect the others in the middle of the worst night of their lives. One child described Williams straddling Shantae on the bed and threatening her life. And a neighbor who came in after the gunfire said the boyfriend had gashes and scratches like he had been fighting, and that Shantae's face looked frozen in surprise, like she was not expecting it. Shantae was found unresponsive on the bed with multiple gunshot wounds and was pronounced dead at the scene, while her boyfriend was shot in the chest but survived and made it to the hospital in stable condition. Deputies found Williams outside, lying face down in the roadway, and took him in without a fight. The neighbor's account of running into him as he left is the kind of thing you do not forget. She asked him where Shantae was, and he told her she was dead. Later, in his interview with police, he tried to spin a completely different story, claiming the home was his primary residence, saying he got into a fight with the boyfriend and that the gun just went off, while denying that he shot Shantae at all. That version does not match the 911 audio, the children who saw him, or the shell casings on the floor. Watch how the reporter lay out the charges he was booked on.
Williams is now behind bars, charged with murder, attempted murder, and being a felon in possession of a firearm.
When deputies first arrived that night, they found him lying face down on the roadway, and inside the bedroom they recovered a black handgun magazine and multiple shell casings, along with signs that he had forced his way in. He was booked into the Palm Beach County Jail on July 12th, appeared in court by video the next day, and a judge ordered him held without bail. Because these are charges and not yet a conviction, the case still has to be fought out in front of a jury, but the account from that house is about as damning as it gets. That neighbor did what she could in an impossible moment. She kept the 6 children in the house away from the bedroom, found Shantae's body on the bed, and tried to help the wounded boyfriend, counting the seconds between his gasping breaths until medics arrived. Prosecutors who deal with these cases say the only way to break this cycle is to keep going after the repeat offenders and to help victims feel safe enough to cooperate. Listen to how one framed the fix.
The solution here is to continue the focus on habitual offenders, but also to help educate victims to speak up and cooperate, because there is no crime that has fewer victims participating in the prosecution than in domestic violence.
The bitter irony is that Shantae did speak up again and again, and it still wasn't enough. Her family spoke about wanting justice and wanting the world to take domestic violence seriously, and advocates kept repeating the same painful point, that she had done everything survivors are told to do. What makes it land even harder is that Shantae's case isn't even the only one like it in that same county. Advocates pointed to a woman named Fridolin Daniel, a 34-year-old mother of Haitian descent, who in November of 2023 drove to a Boynton Beach police station to report that her ex was stalking her and warned officers he had a gun and might kill her, only for that same ex to follow her right into the station lobby and then shoot her dead in her apartment parking lot less than an hour after she left. The part that makes Fridolin's story so hard to stomach is how she was treated inside that station. Body camera footage showed that because of a language barrier, the officer struggled to understand her, and instead of separating her from the man stalking her right there in the lobby, he mocked her accent and told the ex to go find himself a new relationship. No investigation was opened, no supervisor was called, and she was sent on her way. An internal affairs review later suspended that officer for 2 weeks and ordered extra domestic violence training, and her daughter filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city and the officer, whose lawyer called it Stalking 101, a crime happening in his presence while she was mocked, belittled, and dismissed. Same county, same warning signs, same ending. That is our first woman, and her story shows the danger of the moment a woman tries to leave. Our second woman lived in a different state and did nothing more than finish a night of work. Patrice Wilson was a 29-year-old registered nurse at Detroit Receiving Hospital, part of the Detroit Medical Center, and she was the mother of a 7-year-old son. She worked the overnight shift in one of the busiest hospitals in the city, and the people who loved her described her the way you would hope to be described, as beautiful, hardworking, and the kind of person who put everyone else first. She was, by every account, exactly the sort of person a community needs, and she was doing the one thing that experts will tell you is the most dangerous thing a woman in her position can do. She was ending a bad relationship. Patrice had been born and raised in the Detroit area, and she went to nursing for the reason a lot of good nurses do, because she wanted to take care of people. Colleagues called her cherished, family called her the one who always put others first, and she was raising her 7-year-old son while pulling overnight shifts in a hospital that never slows down. She was the kind of woman who ran toward people in trouble for a living, which makes it all the more sickening that she could not be protected from the trouble in her own life. Her relationship with Jameer Miller had turned toxic, and in the months before her death, she made the decision to end it, the very decision that experts say puts a woman in the most danger. The man she was trying to leave was Jameer Miller, a 36-year-old from Inkster, Michigan, and like Little Mac Williams, he did not appear out of nowhere. Miller had a criminal record stretching back to 2007, running through drug possession, carrying concealed weapons, felony firearm charges, assaulting and resisting police, fleeing officers, and even possessing contraband while locked up. His weapons cases in 2008 and 2012 sent him to prison, and while he was incarcerated, he caught another charge for possessing contraband, the kind of record that stacks year after year. More than the rap sheet, multiple women had described a pattern of controlling and abusive behavior, including a 2019 accusation that he slashed a woman's tires, and there was a shadow hanging over him from years earlier that we will get to because it changes how you see everything he did to Patrice. What matters here is that when Patrice decided she was done, Miller decided he was not, and instead of letting her walk away, he started planning. The prosecutor in this case, Wayne County's Kim Worthy, put the whole thing into one sentence that matches everything we saw in Florida. Listen to how she framed who this man was.
The defendant was a man that allegedly would not leave her alone, would not respond to her wishes to leave her alone.
That is the through line of all three of these stories, a man who would not respond to the word no. Worthy went further and made a point that could stand as the theme of this entire video, that leaving is exactly when the danger spikes. Watch how she described what Patrice was simply trying to do.
She was simply trying to live her life, work hard, and break off a relationship that she knew was not good for her.
I do believe that Mr. Miller is a danger.
That last line from the prosecutor is worth holding on to, because it is the exact truth these three stories keep proving. Leaving is supposed to be the safe move, the responsible move, the move that gets you out. For these women, it was the trigger, the thing that flipped a controlling man into a deadly one, and none of them could have known that the moment they finally chose themselves would be the moment they were in the most danger they had ever been in. Understand what Patrice was up against. This was a man with a documented history of controlling the women in his life, a man who other partners said had scared them badly, and Patrice had reached the point where she wanted nothing more with him. She wasn't being reckless or dramatic. She was doing the healthy thing, the thing everyone tells a woman to do, which is to walk away from someone who is not good for you. The tragedy of these stories is that the walking away is treated as the ultimate betrayal, the one thing they will not allow, and Miller turned that twisted logic into a plan. And what he did with his refusal on the morning of May 13, 2023 was cold and calculated in a way that is genuinely hard to sit with. This was not a man snapping in the heat of an argument. This was a man who put on a disguise and waited in a parking lot for hours for a woman to finish helping other people. Watch how prosecutors described how he lay in wait for her.
It's alleged Miller, disguised in a blonde wig, waited for Wilson until the end of her shift at Detroit Receiving Hospital. Once she got to her car, Miller is accused of jumping into the back seat, shooting Wilson multiple times.
Sit with that picture for a second. A grown man in a blonde wig, a hat and glasses, hiding in a hospital parking lot in the early morning, waiting for the woman who was trying to move on from him to walk out to her car after a long night of caring for other people. The abduction happened between roughly 7:40 and 7:53 in the morning, right after she finished her overnight shift on St. Antoine Street, when he forced his way into her black Lincoln SUV and moved her out of the driver's seat. And the most heartbreaking detail of all is that she was not alone on the phone in her final moments. Patrice was on a call when it happened, and the person on the other end heard her screaming before the line suddenly went dead, a detail her own mother, Rosalind Livingston, later shared. Picture that for a second, hearing the fear in someone you love, and then nothing but silence, not knowing where she is or what has happened. That is what her family sat with while the hours passed. And Detroit Receiving is one of the busiest hospitals in the city, the kind of place where a woman finishing a night shift in a dark parking lot should have been the safest person around, not the most exposed. He shot her multiple times inside that vehicle, and then he drove off with her still inside it. Think about the level of planning that took. The wig and the hat and the glasses, the hours spent waiting in the dark, the willingness to do all of that to a woman whose only crime was wanting a different life. The city did not even know the full horror yet. Her family did not know. Her little boy did not know. She had gone to work like she always did, caring for strangers through the night, and she simply never came home. And the search for what happened to her was about to end in the worst possible place on the worst possible day of the year. The discovery came the next afternoon, and the timing of it makes it almost unbearable. Patrice's body was found on Sunday, May 14, 2023, which was Mother's Day, around 2:19 in the afternoon, in the trunk of her own SUV, abandoned at an apartment complex in Novi, about 30 miles from Detroit, with multiple gunshot wounds. A nurse and a young mother, found on the one day of the year set aside to celebrate mothers. Detroit Police Chief James White called the crime horrific and said Patrice had done everything right by ending the relationship, only to fall victim to a man who would not let go. Miller surrendered to police later that same Sunday, walking into the Detroit Detention Center as the search warrants closed in on him. He was charged on June 1st with a stack of felonies, including first-degree murder, felony murder, carjacking, armed robbery, felon in possession of a firearm, and 5 counts of felony firearm. When the judge weighed whether to let him out on bond, there was no hesitation. Listen to how the court handled it.
I do believe that Mr. Miller is a danger, so there is no bond.
Remanded to jail, no bond given Thursday afternoon for 36-year-old Jameer Miller.
The case did not go all the way to a full trial. On October 12, 2023, Miller took a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder, which allowed the other charges to be dropped and spared the family from having to relive every graphic detail in front of a jury. The sentencing on November 7th was raw and full of grief. Patrice's grandmother, Pamela Golden, stood up and told him flat out that he was not fit to live. And Miller had his attorney read a letter in which he claimed remorse and said he had failed Patrice and their families, before Judge Kevin Cox sentenced him to 35 to 60 years in prison. Prosecutor Worthy called the sentence fitting for such a senseless and violent act. And today, Miller is held at Chippewa Correctional Facility, with his earliest possible release listed as the year 2058. For a man who took a life at 29, that means he will be an old man before he ever sees a parole board, if he sees one at all. The family did not stop there, because they believed the hospital where Patrice worked failed her too. On August 1, 2023, which would have been her 30th birthday, her family filed a $200 million lawsuit against the Detroit Medical Center and its parent company, arguing the hospital did not lock down the campus and waited hours to call police after a nurse reported gunshots and a suspicious man lurking for hours. Their attorney did not hold back about what he thought was really going on. Watch him explain why they were suing.
And our position is that had they done what they were supposed to do, she might still be alive.
The family of Patrice Wilson announcing a massive lawsuit.
The suit itself laid out a list of failures. It alleged there were no security patrols in the lot, despite the known risk to night shift workers, that cameras were not working, that staff failed to activate active shooter protocols, even after a nurse reported gunshots and a suspicious man lurking for hours, and that the campus was never locked down. The family also made a painful accusation about why the response was so slow, tying it to the fact that the staff there was predominantly black. Listen to how a family member put it.
We feel that had she been one of those white nurses down there, they would have announced it immediately, and maybe the young lady would still be alive. Instead, they waited 3-4 hours, my understanding is.
The hospital defended its security team and said it acted swiftly to bring in police and that it remained committed to a safe workplace, and the lawsuit has quietly worked its way through the courts without a public resolution. Whatever a court eventually decides, Patrice's case landed in the middle of a real and growing problem, because nurses and other healthcare workers face some of the highest rates of workplace violence of any profession, and surveys in recent years have shown most nurses reporting they have experienced violence on the job, with many saying it is getting worse. The women who spend their nights keeping the rest of us alive are too often left to fend for themselves in the dark. Through all of it, Patrice's family tried to turn the loss into something that would help others. She was an organ donor, so even in death she saved multiple lives, and a scholarship was later created in her name for nursing students who are mothers, so that other women chasing the same dream she chased could get a little help getting there. Her mother has spoken about how hard it is to visit the place where her daughter was taken, and about wanting other families to never feel what hers has felt. That's the kind of grace it takes to lose a child this way and still try to build something good out of it. But here's the part that takes Miller from a violent ex to something far darker. Patrice was not the first woman connected to him to end up gone. Years before, another ex-girlfriend simply vanished and she has never been found. His record was already deep and the pattern in his relationships was already clear. Watch how the coverage summed up the man behind the disguise.
Miller has an extensive criminal history for gun and drug charges, assault, drunk driving, and running from police. He was questioned but never charged in Bianca's disappearance.
Watch the moment the news connected him to that older case.
Jameer Miller Sr. is linked to a missing nursing student, 24-year-old Bianca Green, who went missing in 2011, last seen in Inkster. She was pregnant. Miller and Bianca had dated and have a child together, Jameer Jr.
Bianca Chanel Green, known to her family as BB, was a 24-year-old nursing student who worked at a restaurant in the Detroit airport and disappeared from Romulus, Michigan on March 25, 2011 while she was pregnant, leaving behind her car, her belongings, and her young son, which everyone who knew her said was completely out of character. She texted her mother 2 days later and was never heard from again. Her credit cards were never used, and she shared a son with Miller. She had reportedly hidden from Miller for about a year before she vanished because of his abusive behavior, and while he was questioned at the time, he was never charged. What makes it even worse is that Miller appeared in a Crime Stoppers video back then, playing the grieving single father. Listen to him.
It's hard being a single father, and it's hard for me to even tell him what's going on.
After Patrice was killed, Detroit and Romulus police said they were working together and comparing notes to see if the two cases connected. More than a decade on, though, Bianca's case is still open and unsolved. No charges have ever been filed against Miller in her disappearance, and her family is still searching for answers. So the man who is now serving 35 to 60 years for murdering one nurse also sits at the center of a mystery about another young woman who wanted to raise her kids in peace and simply vanished. That is 2 women now, both connected to a man who could not accept being left. Our third story is the one that gives this whole video its title, and it is the strangest and most disturbing of them all. Shauna Roy, born Shauna Williams, was a 41-year-old woman from Saginaw, Michigan, and by every account, she was the kind of person who made a room lighter. Her best friend of 30 years, Dominique Vaughn, remembered her as someone who would help anybody and greeted people with a warm "Hey, honey," a woman who organized hat and glove giveaways for the homeless and sent uplifting good morning texts to the people she loved. She and Dominique met as kids in a 6th grade science class and stayed close for 30 decades, with Shauna standing as a bridesmaid in her friend's wedding just 2 years before she died. She worked at an automotive plant. She was raising 2 sons, one a teenager and one still a little boy, and she dreamed of opening an adult foster care facility to look after people who had nowhere else to go. Everything about her pointed toward taking care of others, and she believed deeply in redemption and second chances. That belief, that willingness to see the good in someone, is exactly what a man used to get close to her. That man was Tony Roy, and his story is the one the title promises. Tony Roosevelt Roy III was a 44-year-old man with a criminal record that is genuinely staggering to read through. Records tie him to at least 17 felony convictions, including multiple armed robberies, assault with intent to rob while armed, kidnapping, and weapons offenses, with a history stretching back to 1998. In 2000 and 2001 alone, court files show a string of armed robberies and a kidnapping in Washtenaw County that carried sentences of 8 to 20 years. And in 2014, he picked up another armed robbery and gun charges in Genesee County. He was, in plain terms, a violent career criminal who had spent most of his adult life in and out of prison. He was finally paroled on June 30th, 2022, after serving portions of sentences that ran as high as 20 years. His release had not come easy, and that struggle became part of the redemption story he sold. During the pandemic, his parole got pushed back, and in a letter from prison, he asked whether he had been left to die inside, afraid the virus would take him before he ever got out. When he finally walked free, he ran into the same walls a lot of returning citizens hit. He was reportedly defrauded by thousands of dollars while trying to buy a home in Flint, the kind of setback that can push a man right back toward the life he came from. None of that excuses what he did, but it is the backdrop for the public image he built, a man who wanted the world to see a comeback. Now here is where the title comes alive, because Tony did not come out of prison quiet and humble. He came out loud, online, and convinced he was a star. He built a whole public persona as a reformed man, a businessman, and above all, a rapper who had become, in his own words, a legend of the form behind bars. He went live on Facebook constantly, and the videos he left behind are honestly hard to look away from. Watch him just weeks out of prison, flexing cash and preaching about how God blessed him.
For a guy to get out of prison, I ain't been home 50 days, it's $100,000. $100,000 in my hand. You feel me? Bag up, show him the truck.
He talked about faith, about not cherishing money even while waving $100,000 at the camera, about being a leader and a father who never stopped grinding. He even ran a weekly Facebook show where he lectured the community about mental health and manhood, and in one of them he said something that lands very differently now that we know how the story ended. Listen to him name himself as the problem he was trying to fix.
I'm not attacking nobody, I'm attacking Tony Roy. I'm trying to help myself to help others.
On that same show, he even admitted the kind of man he had been, and hearing it now, knowing what he was about to do, it's genuinely unsettling. Watch him lay out his own history with women.
I have had multiple women. I done lied. I done cheated. I done did a lot of stuff that was wrong, but I'm man enough to admit that.
He leaned hard into the rapper identity too. He called himself a legend of the form from his prison days and promoted a welcome home party at a Flint nightclub where he planned to MC, bring out other rappers and comedians, and finally unveil his own skills on the mic, telling his followers he had a lot of sauce for them. This is the image the title of this video points to, a man treating his freedom like a red carpet moment, counting down to a party while the woman he married was already gone. The whole redemption story he sold to the world makes what happened even harder to swallow. He told his followers he had studied businessmen, saved his money, and come home a changed man who took care of everybody around him. And to a woman like Shauna, who genuinely believed people could turn their lives around, that message must have sounded like proof she had been right to give him a chance. He wrapped his violence in the language of faith and growth and community, and he did it out loud, on camera, for anyone to see. That's what makes these cases so dangerous, because the men at the center of them are often charming and convincing right until the moment they aren't.
Behind the cash and the sermons, the real story was falling apart fast. Tony met Shauna online in 2020 while he was still locked up, presenting himself as a reformed man, and they married on July 22, 2022, less than a month after his release. The warning signs were there almost from the jump. In March of 2023, while on parole, Tony was charged with aggravated domestic violence and gun offenses against another woman, though that case fell apart in April when the victim would not testify. It is the same evidentiary problem we saw in Florida, a violent man whose cases keep collapsing before they can stick, and it left him free and married to a woman who was starting to see who he really was. Friends noticed her light going dim almost immediately. The bubbly, generous woman who sent daily good morning texts became withdrawn and heavy, isolated from the people who loved her as Tony grew controlling, demanding to know her every move and accusing her of cheating. Her best friend Dominique remembered their last dinner together on July 7th, after which Shauna went quiet in a way that was not like her at all. By mid-2023, she had made up her mind to get out, to leave him and move back near her family in Saginaw, and the couple was staying in a Kings Lane apartment in Burton that was not even leased in their names. She was, by one account, only about 72 hours from safety when everything went dark. The cracks were already showing on paper. In March of 2023, while on parole, Tony was charged with aggravated domestic violence, torture, and gun offenses against another woman, but the case was dismissed in April when the victim declined to testify. Then, in May, he filed for divorce from Shauna, and the state put him on a GPS tether. That tether is the detail that makes what came next so cold, because Tony treated the day it came off like a holiday. On July 12, 2023, he posted a Facebook video boasting that he was days away from getting off the tether and promoting a welcome home party where he would finally show off his rap skills. Police believe that by the time he filmed that celebration, Shauna was already dead. Her family knew something was wrong because Shauna went silent, which she never did. Suspicious texts came from her phone that did not sound like her at all, using words she would not use, and by mid-July, her mother was calling police about not hearing from her for days. Burton police ran welfare checks at the Kings Lane apartment where Tony was staying, and each time he was vague and evasive, claiming he hadn't seen her in days. On the morning of July 15th, her mother called again, and officers came out and left. But that evening, the mother called once more to report a smell of death and bleach coming from the unit, and this time the officers went in. What they walked into is a nightmare those officers will not forget. Watch how the local station reported what they found inside that apartment.
They discovered 41-year-old Shauna Roy had been completely dismembered. Her body parts had been placed in garbage bags and set in the bathtub.
A man who spent his days online preaching about God, manhood, and rap had, according to police, murdered his wife and cut her apart while she was trying to leave him. Watch how investigators laid out who they believe did it.
It was then when officials determined her husband, 44-year-old Tony Roy, had killed her, mutilated her body, and left it in the apartment.
Her identification, phone, and purse were later found in his vehicle, tying him directly to the scene. A warrant went out for open murder, and Tony ran, heading for Detroit in her car. The end came on the night of July 17th. Michigan State Police spotted him as a passenger in an SUV on Telegraph Road near 7 Mile and moved in for a traffic stop. And instead of surrendering, Tony pulled out a gun. He put the gun to his own head first, then turned it on the woman in the car with him, using her as a shield, while troopers set up a perimeter with an armored vehicle and pleaded with him over a loudspeaker to give up and wait for negotiators. He grew more hostile, ducking behind the woman, and told them he could not go back to jail and did not intend to make it alive. When he aimed the gun at her head, the troopers opened fire in a burst that lasted only seconds. Watch the chaos of those final moments, later released on police video.
Roll down the passenger window and drop the gun outside the car.
Gun sir! Gun sir!
Get her out! Come on!
Tony was killed at the scene, and the woman he was using as a shield survived with only minor injuries from broken glass, later saying she had given him a ride, not knowing what he had done. The man who promised the world a comeback ended the way so many of his crimes started, with a gun and a hostage. The local police chief said it plainly that given his history, Tony knew exactly what the outcome was going to be. The whole confrontation was later captured on trooper body camera and dashboard footage that was released the following February, showing the perimeter, the commands, and the final barrage of gunfire. Shauna never got a trial, never got to face him in a courtroom because he made sure the story ended on his terms and not hers. As unusual as the dismemberment and the Facebook boasting make this case, the deeper pattern behind it is not unusual at all in Michigan, and there is one case that shows it almost too well. A man named Gregory Green had stabbed his pregnant wife to death back in 1991, served about 16 years, and was paroled in 2008 with strong community support, including from a pastor who vouched for how reformed he was. He married that pastor's daughter, and then in 2016, amid a divorce, he killed all 4 of the children in the home and left her mother alive to see it. A crime so devastating that he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. A violent man, released, sold to everyone as changed, then lethal again the moment a new relationship fell apart. It is the same warning Shauna's story screams, that the reformed face a dangerous man shows the world can be the most convincing lie he ever tells. And in the middle of all that, don't lose sight of who Shauna was. She was days from moving back near her family. Her 2 sons are now being raised by their grandmother, and the foster care home she dreamed of opening for people with nowhere else to go will never exist. Her best friend Dominique said it best, that Shauna did not deserve this and had so many dreams still ahead of her. A woman who spent her life trying to give other people a safe place ended up with none of her own, and that's the part that should stay with you. So let me bring the 3 of them back together, because that's what this was always about. Shantae Butts filmed her stalker, filed report after report, and left her home for safety, and she was killed 6 days after the warrant that was supposed to protect her. Patrice Wilson finished a night shift caring for strangers and was ambushed in her own car by a man in a wig who couldn't accept that she was done. And Shauna Roy believed in second chances so deeply that she gave one to the wrong man, and she was days from freedom when he took everything. 3 different states, 3 different men, one identical moment, the moment each woman decided to leave. Look at the warnings too, because in every one of these stories, the signs were loud long before the ending. Little Mac Williams had been convicted of choking Shantae and had a record going back years, and everyone in the system knew his name. Jameer Miller had a rap sheet stretching back to 2007 and a woman who vanished on his watch more than a decade before Patrice. Tony Roy was a career criminal with 17 felonies who was charged with domestic violence again while still on parole. None of these men hid who they were. The danger was visible from a distance, and the people around these women, from the courts to the police to the systems built to protect them, kept getting a chance to step in and kept coming up short. The lesson here is not that these women did something wrong because they did everything right. The lesson is for the rest of us, to take it seriously when someone says they're scared, to believe them the first time and not the 5th, and to understand that leaving is not the end of the danger, but often the sharpest point of it. Rest in peace to Shantae Butts, to Patrice Wilson, and to Shauna Roy. If you know someone stuck in a situation like the ones in this video, don't wait for it to get worse before you say something, because your voice might be the one that gets them out in time. Drop a comment if a moment in this story stayed with you, and share it with someone who needs the reminder.